Hi everyone, Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. In the Fireside Chat series, we're celebrating leaders that combine humanity, mission, and strategy to build amazing organizations. Right now, we're happy to chat with Bhavan Smith, founder of Until There Are Nine. Bhavana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about Until There Are Nine? What is it?
Sure. So the organization, I'll start with the name, as I'm sure many of the listeners and viewers know of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was always asked by reporters how many women Supreme Court justices will be enough to sit on Supreme Court, and she always said, "When there are nine." So the organization, started with the name of Nine until a friend and a colleague said, why don't you call it Until There Are Nine? Because the mission and the vision of the organization is for when women achieve pay and promotion equity in the workforce. So Nine really stands for equity. And the mission of the organization is to help women specifically overcome their reluctance to raise their hand and negotiate for themselves and be their advocates for when it comes to pay and asking for promotions.
That's beautiful, extremely important. I'm very aligned with this vision. What I'm curious about is how do you do this? How do you work with women to help them achieve this equality?
Sure. So it's really a network of advisors that we have as volunteers that have signed up to work one-on-one with women. And it is really just kind of, I like to call it like you get your own personal wing woman or wingman when you need some guidance or someone in the background to really help support your pay, or when you want to ask for a raise or a promotion. So it's a one-on-one. We have developed a pretty comprehensive playbook that really goes through various scenarios. So let's say you've been at the company for a couple of years, you haven't really gotten a raise, or you don't know how to ask for that promotion. And we can help you just kind of understand the context of the situation, help you build a business case for yourself. Like, what are companies really looking to understand from their employees, of really leading with the value contributions, and even something as simple as phrasing the ask. Like, how do you specifically ask? And then, more importantly, after you phrase the ask, stop talking. Because I think women I think people in general feel the need to continue to justify why they want to raise, why they want the promotion, and then start to, kind of really deflect or say things like, if it's okay, or I'm flexible. But I think women really need to take a firmer stance of asking for what they believe they're worth.
There's something so powerful about using silence, right, as a tool to get your message across.
Yes.
Speaking is not the only way to get a message across.
No. And I think when we give that guidance of stop talking, you can just see the faces light up, or just like laugh, because they know. And, I've heard so many women and a couple of men also say to me, oh, that is great advice, because I'm so chatty. So there is really power in silence, and forcing the silence and getting somebody else to respond.
Yeah. Love that. Curious to learn a little bit more about the process of how you created the playbook. To create something so comprehensive that's such a valuable resource for so many people probably takes quite a bit of work and the efforts of many people working together.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it started as a 2-pager. So, one evening in the weekend last summer, I just started writing. I said, a couple of things, starting out, where first, you really want to understand in what state is it illegal for employers to ask for your past salary. Right. And then I shared that with a couple of the founding members, and they said, well, think about this. And what about that? And it really just evolved with input from the founding members, and, and all of, like, everybody together just kind of contributing ideas of, did you think about this? And then it just, as you start writing, as I'm sure, we're all familiar with, when you start writing, more ideas come to you, and it just really snowballed. It started from like a 2 to 3 page Word document to what currently lives as I think the last count was probably like 40 pages, 30 to 40 pages of pure content, and guidance and support and pro tips. And it really just has evolved, because it's not just how do you phrase the ask, or how do you ask for a raise or negotiate a salary, but how do you actually build that business case? So I think that's really where it's evolved from, knowing what states are, where it's illegal, to actually what you really want to do before you even think about the salary is how do you establish your worth?
That's so smart. I love how you connect this mission with very practical tips. Would love to take a step back and learn a little bit more about your journey. You're building something so important. I'm curious about what you went through that led you to starting this movement.
Sure. So I went through a lot of nothing to have to come, to arrive at this place where it's not like I, had been this just master negotiator. I really had not negotiated. I was not given any, advice or guidance from family, friends, colleagues to, or having that mentor early on that I think some people are very fortunate to have, of, saying, hey, you should negotiate that, or you should go ahead and ask and feel confident. I was always a confident person, but in this aspect, I didn't even know that was a possibility until in one of my, more senior roles, it wasn't even about negotiation. It was about not giving away just either what I was making or actually turning the tables on the question to the prospective employer. And then realizing that just by having done that very minor change of, instead of saying what my expectations are, really putting it out there as, well, what are you actually offering for the role? And that in and of itself was just this, kind of this like light bulb went in my head. And I was sharing that story with one of my friends, and she said, oh, that's really good. Save that for me when it's my turn. Meaning that when it was her time to, interview for a job and negotiate or have that compensation discussion, which frankly is very awkward, for a lot of people, men or women, then the fact that she said, save that for me, was really just kind of that light bulb that went in my head. And I said, oh, that'd be really good to have this almost like group chat on Facebook or on LinkedIn with a few of us, right? Where we come to each other for advice, tips, and tricks when each of us are in our negotiations, for salary. And that I didn't do anything about it for a few years because I had a big corporate job and didn't have time. And until last summer, I was on a sabbatical, and I realized, like, if I don't do it now, I never will. And then it really just, it went from, well, what's the 1 to 2 page? And, we can actually help a lot more women beyond my circle. And what if I helped you, Lisa, and you help someone else, and then they help someone else, and then, Dan is an advisor and he helps someone else, and just really helping each other. And again, that's the whole concept of 9, is one by one, we can get to equity in some way, shape, or form if we're helping each other.
I love that vision of paying it forward to help each other. Would love to learn about an example to kind of bring to life. I'm sure it's so rewarding to see the effects of your work and the people that you work with. Could you just tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure, absolutely. So I've always believed in the idea of helping, training, mentoring, and have a few mentees. And one actually, that I've been working with even before I started 9 was just as a mentor relationship, was giving her advice and guidance on a job that she had and how she can kind of really improve and stand out. I mean, really smart woman. And she was interviewing for a role. And she reached out to me. It was right around the time when I had started talking about 9, I think at the end of last year. And she reached out to me and said, I would love your help on this. And I'm looking to interview for this role. And I don't know how to ask or how should I negotiate. So it was very straightforward. And she was, started those discussions, and she stated her ask. They said, well, we can't really give you the higher end of the range, but we can give you the lower one. So, okay, well, knowing that you are capable of doing the work, how can you actually, negotiate a couple of other things? One is, hey, you might not get the money now, but maybe you want to set something in place where in 6 months, you talk to your employer during those discussions of, in 6 months, can we set some KPIs and success metrics So in 6 months, we can come back and reevaluate, and then I can get the additional salary. And they agreed. They said, great, we can't give you the higher end now, but we can come back, we can agree to a discussion and evaluate your performance in 6 months. So that was something that was agreed to and in the contract. The other thing, which a lot of women don't know, is negotiating their title. So especially for a new job, and if there isn't like a set, title in some of these big corporate firms, you do have the ability to negotiate your title. And she was able to do that as well. So, in addition to money, there are other things. She was able to get a spot bonus, at the sign-on. So I think in addition to money, there are other things that we can help, because compensation is so much more than your base salary pay. It really kind of starts with, even just quality of life, flexible schedules. But that was one example. And, a couple more, even women who've been in the business, for 25 years, who have never been able to ask or, negotiate salary. And to the point where stating the ask, but then thinking about, okay, in that waiting period, when you're waiting for that employer to come back to you or your boss to come back to you and say, can they or can't they, being prepared with if-then scenarios. Like, okay, if they come back to you with, below your ask, how will you respond? What will you say? Are there other things? Like, what ideas can you give them? Like, okay, you can't give me the salary, but what about a bonus that you can give me instead for the value that I have contributed? So there's been a couple of examples where it's been very all encompassing on compensation.
I think it's fantastic that you don't just limit the conversation to salary, because when we think about all these other dimensions of work and our roles, they speak to identity in a lot of ways. Yeah. So if we feel like we have a title that truly reflects who we are and what we contribute, if we have a work schedule that reflects how we want to live, it's very empowering. And I think our relationship to work in American culture is so important. It's a huge, huge part of our identity. And if we have shame and guilt and we just know that we're not being really honored by our work, it can be really troubling.
No, absolutely. And we have a few advisors in our network, and, two stand out in terms of advice that they've given in terms of what can be negotiated. One advisor said, I negotiated a flexible work schedule before they were even a thing. And, we know a lot of women who had 4-day work weeks because it was out of necessity. Those are things that can be negotiated. And then recently I had an advisor come to me and say, hey, did you think about, or what you might want to add into the playbook is actually including learning and development, coaching, training sessions as something that you can actually negotiate with an employer. So, okay, you can't give me the money, but what about, money that you're spending towards training and professional development? How do you actually include that as something that you expect from your employer as part of total compensation? So I think, it is absolutely, to your point, Dan, goes well beyond just money. It is about professional development and personal development, work-life balance. But I think having these advisors that have such, different experiences, and the beauty of the playbook is that it's all captured in one document that I think people can really learn from. And that was the whole point. It's just like us helping each other and paying it forward.
Yeah. Really, really interesting. And I think a playbook, I can see how that's just such a powerful tool for someone to pick up, whether they get coaching or mentorship or not.
Yes.
Curious also how you think about sort of system-wide change. So it's one thing to equip people one by one with the skills they need, right, to respond powerfully to these tricky conversations with employers. Are you planning with Until There Are 9 to think about system-wide change or advocacy in any way?
Yes. So I think there's personal advocacy for sure, right? So, in terms of promoting and amplifying the message of pay equity. I think when it comes to system-wide changes, there's a couple of ways to think about it. One, and just at the very, high level, it's at the voting booth. It's voting for candidates that actually believe in, work equity, and, giving women, especially who are, who just don't have the funding when it comes to childcare, and the Equal Pay for Equal Work Acts that are happening in various states. at the individual state level. So I think voting and being aware of those candidates and asking them about those issues is certainly something that we could all contribute to. The other thing is at the corporate level. Women can only do so much individually, to your point. We can only ask for so much. I think we need to remove some of those barriers so I or you or anyone else who's a senior person, on the corporate side, that has to recognize pay inequity or pay gaps. If you are at in a position of influence and you see like, hey, there's some gaps here, or there's inequities that that you have two people or a team of people that do all of the same thing, but there's significant differences in pay. I think that's something that, you have to kind of call out and correct and understand why it exists that way. The other thing is at the corporate level. So if you're in HR, you're in finance, and it's doing things like conducting pay audits. So we shouldn't have to expect the government to force companies to do pay audits, to be transparent about pay ranges that they're offering. And I think companies should, because we're all human, right? We should all be helping each other, that the head of HR, the head of recruiting, the CFO, the CEO, these are all people. And we all have families. And every single one of us is affected when women are paid 20 cents less on the dollar, and we're missing out on millions of dollars over the course of our lifetime. So helping, at the corporate level, it's really recognizing that what they can do to promote pay transparency, but also making sure there's salary bands, pay bands, and people have a really clear understanding of why they're making the money that they're making and what they can do to make more. And it's all based around contribution.
That makes so much sense. And I like how even when you talk about system-wide change, you're able to bring it down to practical actions. I think that's a beautiful quality, and that's the way change happens.
Yes, no, yeah, thank you. If I'm anything, I'm practical, and it's like, great, there's one thing that we can do about raising awareness, but like, okay, what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
And I'm very much in the Gallup strengths. My number one, strength is achiever. I'm more of a like, okay, what are we doing? So
I get that vibe.
make it happen. Like, okay, that's why I love the playbook and I love the advisors. And it's really just like, okay, this is something that is in our control. We also need to, get women into industries and occupations that just pay more. There's a reason that 100% of the jobs lost in the workforce were women, because we tend to pick because of, family and whatever it is. I mean, we're more educated than our male counterparts, but we tend to fall into industries and occupations that are just paid less. So how do we, STEM programs, for example, are a great way to, get women into, tech and engineering type fields. So in terms of, when you ask about, system-wide changes.
It makes a lot of sense. Something that I'm very curious about is you're currently running until there are 9. You also have a senior position at a big corporation. How are you balancing all of these amazing and important things in your own life?
I have given up any form of entertainment in terms of, I used to be able to spend a couple of hours just watching TV and binging on Netflix. That has gone by the wayside. I also have a 12-year-old daughter that, keeps me busy enough. And it's really, evenings and weekends is when I'm able to, kind of really try to, balance everything.
That's a lot. I can imagine. I think it's beautiful that you mentioned your 12-year-old daughter. Do you feel like there's some inspiration for until there are 9, given that you have a daughter, given that you're kind of the role model for her?
And that hit my heart, because absolutely, she is my inspiration. And I think from the time she was born, I was leaving her to go to work. I remember thinking, I'm like, why am I like, I'm leaving her to go work, and I feel like I'm not getting that like fulfillment, right? And I needed to find something that was giving me fulfillment. That's something I could do for her. And she knows this because I tell her sometimes, but I want her to be proud of me. I want her to see her mom as a role model. and, doing something that I feel like, she can say, wow, that's my mom. And that makes me really proud. And it took me a while to find out what that is. Again, this was not something that felt forced. I knew I had she was my inspiration to do something good and better and bigger than myself. And this was something, the topic of Until There Are Nine was just felt so organic that it just kind of, like made perfect sense. So, and plus I no longer look towards like my career as my only source of fulfillment, and I think that's really important as well. Then like now I feel like I have something that I can be proud of beyond just my career.
That's so beautiful. I love how the personal life and the professional life has started to intertwine, and you really are this force of inspiration for your daughter. That's amazing.
Well, not all the time, but yes, I try to be.
Can't all be perfect.
I can't win with her all the time.
Well, 12 years old is not the easiest age to win with.
I always joke at work, I could have the toughest day at work with clients and folks that I work with, and it doesn't compare to the challenge of being home. Some days are better than others.
I'm sure that's the case for all of us. So speaking of challenges, really curious about the future. So as you think about both what you want to do with Until There Are Nine and just in general, what's next on your agenda? What are you excited to achieve in the future?
So I think specific to Until There Are Nine, I think it is really about helping as many women as possible and trying to figure out how to do it at scale. Right. And, whether it's through the network of advisors, whether it's the playbook, how do we make it more accessible to women? And how do we actually, get them to participate. But I think, so that's at the individual level. I think certainly, I want to think about, because part of it is like, I'm like building the car as I'm driving it. So, and I'm okay with that, and I think I don't need to have it completely thought through, because so much of my inspiration comes from just having conversations, and saying, oh, think about that, oh, that would be a great add-on to Nine. Is really, how do we actually get more, how do we get corporate America involved and get them to realize that this is actually good for business, because it is, right? The more equity they have, the leadership, women in leadership roles, the better, like those companies have just found to be more profitable. So from future standpoint for Nine, it is how to scale it, not just at the individual level, but more in the corporate and the alliance and getting the word out on a bigger platform, for sure. And then, in parallel, continue to work and, raise my daughter. And, but yeah, in terms of the future, that's as far as I've gotten.
Very cool. Well, I think you've gotten to a good place. So have we in this conversation, and really enjoyed it. One of the last questions that we love to leave people with is, we've talked about some serious subjects and dealt with some complicated territory. Curious, what do you do for fun when you're not making this impact in the world? How do you relax?
So I do like to go to the gym. I go to a title boxing gym and take a class where I get to hit a heavyweight bag for 45 minutes straight, and that is actually quite fun. I love to hang out with my daughter. She is a blast. And making TikToks and or watching TikToks or some form of TikTok incorporation into our day. And I also get to, I have an amazing fiance who lives in California, and he's got a great son. So, get to hang out with them whenever I can. I love to travel. I mean, that's obviously been limited severely, because of COVID, but I do love to travel. And, if, again, sometimes the career funds the passion, and the passion is travel and being on a nice warm beach somewhere. Other than that, I do love to read when I have time. I'm actually currently reading a book called Women Don't Ask. And, but I do also love a good, 1,000-page fiction novel that I can just kind of dive deep into. And there's always some just mindless programming that I can, relax with when I have time.
There you go. Well, listen, appreciate your perspective and definitely learned a lot from you today. And great conversation, Bhavana. So thank you so much for it.
I appreciate the opportunity, Dan and Lisa.